Rick, could you take a short moment to explain and give a broader picture of what positive psychology is and what it is about?
Yeah. So to put it in a really sort of geeky way, imagine a range from -10 to +10 with, let's call it 0 in the middle. And another way of imagining that is sort of how far underwater is a person and then how far up toward the heavens is a person, let's say. And much of the study of psychology, understandably, rested in a medical model, has been about moving from -10 to 0, or maybe +1, maybe, right? And much as if you go in to see a doctor and you're not in the minus territory, they sort of pat you on the head and say, "You're good, get out of here. I need to work with someone who's underwater," right? So that's been true. It's also been true that beginning easily 100 years ago with people like Carl Jung, and then extending further with Wilhelm Reich, and then the humanistic psychologists of Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, people like that in America, and certainly others in that space as well in Europe and around the world. There's been a growing interest in what's above the waterline, right? What moves from 0 even all the way up to 10 in terms of things like peak experiences and so forth. So the study of the upper reaches of mental health has been easily 100 years old in terms of academic circles, and around the world culturally, including in the indigenous people, the first people traditions of the world, which for me are very important to include and respect, in the humanities, in the spiritual traditions, the religions of the world. There's been a great interest in what's north of 0, right? Including what's north of 5. Like, what is the upper half or quarter or tenth or hundredth of the human possibilities for us all? That's been really long-standing. Then in the last 20 years or so, there's been a kind of a rebranding of a lot of that, a reframing of it under the general heading of positive psychology, particularly as a research discipline, and it's gone from there. But for me, a lot of that is old wine in new bottles, and I think that it's really curious, actually, that the field of clinical psychology, or psychology in general, which is extremely interested in the personal history of individuals and how what is happening today is the effect of a lot of preceding causes. And yet the field as a whole tends to be very ahistorical and forgets often what our predecessors in the lineage really had created. And so for me, it's really important to kind of honor that. So in that frame, to give you a super short response, I think positive psychology is a focused interest in the territory of human experience and functioning that is, in the range of, +2 upward, and is the territory of resilient well-being, lovingness, gratitude, and increasingly, which is my own focus, particularly one of my most recent book and the online programs, the online Neurodharma program, is a focus on what the great teachers around the world, and also people like Maslow and Jung and others, have been focused on as really deep, profound background in your consciousness of just contentment and inner peace, and a fundamental resting in love in the core of your being, around which could be you're scrambling to solve problems, or your son's moving out and you feel sad you're not going to hug him for a while because we're practicing social distancing with him and so forth. That can be around the edges, but in the core of your being, it really is possible to develop this unshakable sense of peace, contentment, and love while dealing with the challenges of life, because peace, contentment, and love make you a lot more resilient. And that unshakable core can be literally hardwired into your own nervous system using the methods that I've developed and you're talking about.